from the close of a recent article in the New York Times. I thought I'd start out with that, by Scott Rayburn, with the headline, Why John Ruskin, born 200 years ago, is the man of the moment. This is a quote from the article. He holds our feet to the moral fire. He makes us disconcerted. My belief is that Ruskin is a spot-on critique of modern America, as relevant now as he was then. What would Ruskin have made of post-truth politics, of the richest 1% owning almost half the world's wealth, of a plastic-strewn planet where climate change may be beyond repair? Maybe we should go back to him. He saw it coming. End of quote. This is a sentiment that I think has been steadily growing in the culture since the centennial of Ruskin's death in the year 2000, and we're happy to have an occasion to celebrate that rich and complex legacy tonight as we celebrate Ruskin's birthday. My name is Gabriel Meyer. I'm the executive director of the Ruskin Art Club, now in its 131st year as LA's oldest cultural association. Someone once asked me, how do you get to be 131 years old? And I said, one word, reinvention. So we are always pleased to be working with our old friends here at the Doheny Memorial Library, especially with our friend and fellow Ruskin Art Club member, Tyson Gaskell, Director of Communications and Events for the Doheny Libraries. And needless to say, it's a special treat to be co-hosting this concert in the music salon of the Hancock Museum. If, as LA Weekly claimed some years ago, that the museum is haunted, I can assure you, on the basis of having spent considerable time here recently, that they're a very gracious and accommodating bunch. This is the inaugural event in Southern California, at least as far as I know, of a year of events celebrating the legacy of John Ruskin in the 21st century. A celebration that will continue here at USC next month with our annual Ruskin Lecture, this year featuring the distinguished Ruskin scholar, Robert Hewison. And there are flyers available on the table out in the foyer about that. And it will be capped, this year will be capped by a two-day Ruskin conference, John Ruskin, 19th Century Visionary, 21st Century Inspiration, at the Huntington Library in December. So this will be a great occasion. For more information on all this and more, including Ruskin-related events and exhibitions taking place around the world, please visit our website, www.ruskinartclub.com. Our British cousins inaugurated this special Ruskin bicentennial celebration last Friday, on February 8th, the actual birthday of John Ruskin, at the Royal Academy of Arts in London, with a concert and presentation actually similar to the one that we're doing tonight, also featuring a performance of Sarah Rodgers' evocative King of the Golden River, based on Ruskin's fairy tale. To place Ruskin, as we move our evening along, to place Ruskin not only in a Victorian frame, but in a relationship to our own time and our concerns, I've asked Professor Amy Ritson-Bolton to say a few words about Ruskin as we begin. Amy gave our 2017 Ruskin Lecture here at USC on Ruskin's Truths in an Age of Fake News. She is currently Associate Professor of British and Irish History at Loyola Marymount University. She is a companion of the Guild of St. George, which is Ruskin's charity founded in 1871, and we are honored to have her as a member of the Ruskin Art Club. You can also purchase Amy's lecture later on today at the reception. So Amy, if you'll go forward.
Thank you. So I think it's really interesting, this new interest in Ruskin, and of course I love it. I got to Ruskin because I was writing a history of art museums in Britain in the 19th century. And I was really interested why people in Manchester and Birmingham and Liverpool thought that art museums were the thing that industrial workers needed. And what I found over and over and over again was this name, John Ruskin. John Ruskin. It was just popping up all over the archives. And I had to grapple with, okay, who was this guy? Why were people so into him? Why did they think art was good for factory workers? And I think what I came to understand about why they thought he was such an important influence on their lives and why he had so much to offer to 19th century cities is, I think, also really interestingly why many of us are now finding that he has a lot to say about our world and our time now. I think it's interesting especially that in the New York Times piece and in other discussions of him now, he's being really seen as a prophet speaking to climate change and issues of environmental degradation. But I think the important thing is that actually Ruskin also has a lot to say to us about not treating people like machines.
Yeah.
First and foremost, he really wanted us to think not just about what we were doing to the environment as something outside of ourselves, or nature as something outside of ourselves, but what our whole system of profit and wealth was doing to our fellow human beings. And that was the heart of his social critique and the heart of what he had to say. And I also think it's very interesting that we're in the midst of starting to debate the Green New Deal, which likewise thinks about treating climate change, but also massive inequality and wealth redistribution at the same time. So these concerns are absolutely contemporary, even as, of course, they also come out of the legacy of industrial capitalism of the 19th century. Ruskin wanted people to look at their world. And he really thought that if you could train people to see, if you could get people to see, that meant seeing the beauty of nature, the wonder of the world around us, but also what the pursuit of profit ahead of everything else was doing to the world in Britain in the 19th century, and of course the wider world. This piece, The King of the Golden River, has a lot to say about the pursuit of wealth above all else. And we're going to get to hear that tonight. So I guess for me, I would invite you to think about what it means to listen for beauty, to look for beauty, and then to think about who has access to beauty, who has access to humanity, who we treat as meaningful in our society, and who we treat as disposable. Because it's that sense that any human or any part of creation is disposable and can be treated as a step towards wealth and somebody else's profit, then Ruskin really wanted us to think about and consider. So enjoy the concert.
Wow.
Tonight to celebrate the birthday of John Ruskin. We are the Felix Quartet, a group of students at the USC Thorne School of Music. For violins, we have Yuqi from China and Kevin Tsao from Los Angeles. And on viola, we have Nao Kubata from Michigan. And my name is Allan Hon, the cellist from not too far away in Orange County. I thought I'd talk a little bit about the piece that we're going to be playing for you tonight. When we normally think of child prodigies who influenced the world of music, our first thought is usually Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. But we tend to forget that Felix Mendelssohn himself was also a child prodigy as well. For example, he wrote 12 string symphonies between the ages of 12 and 14. He wrote his first piano quartet at the age of 13, his first full symphony at the age of 15, and his famous octet for strings for 4 violins, 2 violas, and 2 cellos when he was 16. Mendelssohn wrote this piece that we're going to be playing for you tonight, the String Quartet Number 1, Opus 12, in 1829, when he was just 20 years old. The second in a group of 5 string quartets that he would compose through the span of his lifetime. It was dedicated to a woman named Betty Pister, who is his neighbor, actually, and the daughter of a Berlin astronomer. The piece has 4 movements, and it displays what we tend to call cyclic form, where material that is introduced in the beginning comes back towards the end. The first movement is very lyrical, it has sweeping melodies, and it's very peaceful. This is followed by the second movement, titled Canzonetta, which also means song. It's very cheeky and has very elfish characteristics. The third movement is lush and rich in its harmonies, and the last movement is turbulent and energetic. And the material from the beginning in the first movement comes in to more or less quell the storm, bringing the piece to a peaceful close. So when Mendelssohn wrote this in 1829, it was 2 years after the death of Beethoven, who died in 1827. And even though Mendelssohn's composition style isn't quite the same as Beethoven's, he still pays homage to him with certain phrases within the work, as a farewell to this great composer. One other connection that I'd like to make is between Mendelssohn and John Ruskin himself, actually. John Ruskin lived with his wife in a little town called Denmark Hill in England. He moved there in 1842. Denmark Hill now is part of a little town that we call London. And so his address in London, or in Denmark Hill, sorry, was 163 Denmark Hill. And it was just a couple doors down in 168 Denmark Hill that Mendelssohn wrote a song called the Spring Song, which he included in his song cycle, Songs Without Words, also written in 1842. So they were there at the same time. So without further ado, here is Mendelssohn's String Quartet, number 1, Opus 12. We hope you enjoy.
wooded and mountainous part of Syria. There was in old time a valley of the most surprising of luxuriant fertility. It Dawn came at last, and the two brothers looked out of the window into Treasure Valley. A mass of ruin and of desolation. They cried. if anyone should cast unholy water in the river, he will become a black stone.
Before we move to the foyer for a little birthday reception, let me indicate that there are, I always have to say these things. There are materials and booklets on Ruskin and the Ruskin Art Club on the table in the foyer, along with a few copies of the recent New York Times piece that I quoted at the beginning of the evening. Also copies of the new, brand new Wendell Berry Reader. These are left over from our recent symposium here at USC last October on the farmer, poet, activist Wendell Berry. You can also pick up, importantly, flyers for March the 18th, Monday, March the 18th, which is the Ruskin Lecture by Robert Hewison, who was one of the great figures in our time in terms of Ruskin scholars. And he's really coming with a marvelous presentation called John Ruskin, The Argument of the Eye. And the whole thing will really be on Ruskin's aesthetics, focus on the drawings, on Ruskin's sense of beauty and what it means, as Amy was talking earlier, what it means to see. Elena, Karina Byrne, was going to end tonight with a comment, but she came down with a cold, so I'm going to fill in for her just to close the evening. I'm going to read something just very briefly, really Ruskin's last published words, the final paragraph of his unfinished biography, Praeterita, which is Latin for bygone times, or times past. Proust wasn't a fan of Ruskin's for nothing. And written really when Ruskin was moving into his twilight. He had had a major breakdown. He knew he wasn't going to finish his autobiography. He was moving into a time where he was removing himself from public life, from writing, from lecturing, into the care of his cousin, Joni Agnew, and her husband, Arthur Severn, the son of Joseph Severn, who cared for the dying Keats. So a lovely connection there. So Ruskin is just entering this time, as with many people troubled with mental breakdown, the people and time, it's all beginning to merge. Even in these paragraphs, there are people who were referred to here that were not living at the time that Ruskin refers to them. But it's it's poignant certainly, but also Ruskin to the end. So this is the final paragraph of Praeterita in the chapter called Joanna's Care. Lovely passage as he moves into the care of his cousin. How things bind and blend themselves together. The last time I saw the fountain of Trevi, it was from Arthur's father's room, Joseph Severn's, where we both took Joni to see him in 1872, and the old man made a drawing of his pretty daughter-in-law now in her schoolroom. He himself then eager in finishing his last picture of the marriage in Cana, which he had caused to take place under a vine trellis, and delighted himself by painting the crystal and ruby glittering of the changing rivulet of water out of the Greek vase glowing into wine. Fontebranda. I last saw it with Charles Eliot Norton. Under the same arches where Dante saw it. We drank of it together, and we walked together that evening on the hills above, where the fireflies among the scented thickets shone fitfully in the still, undarkened air. How they shone, moving like fine, broken starlight through the purple leaves. How they shone, through the sunset that faded into thunderous night, as I entered Siena 3 days before, the white edges of the mountainous clouds still lighted from the west, and the openly golden sky, calm behind the gate of Siena's heart, with its still golden words, Kormanyas tibi sena pandit. More than her gates, Siena opens her heart to you. And the fireflies everywhere, in the sky, in the cloud, rising, and the fireflies everywhere, and falling, mixed with the lightning, and more intense than the stars.